Hello, good evening and welcome. Welcome to Rangers Radio. Joining myself, Oxford, on the show tonight is the one and only Jeff Holmes, the fan with a pen. Evening, Jeff.
Hi, Ox. How you doing? It's actually a pencil.
Is it?
So,
is that because it's got a rubber at the end?
Definitely. Definitely. I prefer pencils to pens, honestly. HB pencils. Mm-hmm.
All right, mate. How are you, mate? Before we start, how's things? How's life? Everything okay?
I'm great. I'm great, thanks. Everybody's fine. Everybody's fine at the moment, touch wood, but we're seem to be getting back into wee mini lockdowns all over the place now. So I don't think we'll be going to any big lockdowns. I think it'll all be a series of mini ones now. Although we're not here to talk about health or politics, are we? So.
We were looking at some stuff, mate, and it's hard to believe it's nearly 2 years ago since we first chatted, mate. Believe it or not, yeah, on
right?
Rangers Radio.
I cannot believe that. That's life. We've got to start the cliches, do we? About being a small world and life's going too short. These things, I know.
Okay, but then Mark, obviously, when you came on, Mark came on and gave us an interview, which was first class, mate. First class. What a laid back character.
He's fantastic. Great guy. Half decent player as well.
Better than half decent, mate.
Don't tell Hugh Burns that.
I'll never forget that cross for Drinkle's goal.
Oh, right. What one was that? That was
Drinkle's goal, the 5-1 game, the cross for Drinkle's goal.
Oh,
yeah.
Aye, that was awesome. That was he had that, didn't he? He had that about him.
So we're calling you the fan with the pen or pencil, mate. Yeah, pencil, right?
Right, okay.
So your pencil's always loaded, and obviously some people are new to Rangers Radio. Just give us a bit of your backstory. You're just a bear. You came from,
Maryhill.
The north end of the city. I mean, you know what I mean? It's the north of the city. It's obviously not the west end where the finer people come from, you know.
No, but, certainly not.
But you ended up, you had a job, various jobs, and then you ended up an author writing some tremendous books about our history, our players, our story. How did it happen, mate?
Always interested. If I can remember, because I was just always writing, always scribbling things down in bits of paper, always doing wee match reports, doing this, doing that. Used to born and brought up across the road from Firhill in Maryhill, and my brothers were mad Thistle fans. My dad was a Thistle fan. I should have been a Thistle fan as well, because one of the first games I was at was the League Cup final when Thistle beat Celtic 4-1.
Who only had that against you, mate?
I get dragged along that day, and God, what a day that was, waving a wee Thistle flag. But nah, I was a blue sheep of the family. It was Rangers for me, and we started going to the games in the John Greg Well bus from Maryhill, which I don't know if you're in Maryhill at all, but there's a McDonald's now in Maryhill Road.
Maryhill Well, mate.
That was where the John Greg Well left, right outside there, and I lived round the corner in Whisper at Chapel Street. And
right, okay.
Used to go in the John Greg Well bus. I was about 10 or 11. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and just lifelong fan.
Right, so you've got the bug for the Rangers. You're in school. Was there stories then, or was English a big part of your education?
No, it was mostly glue. Unfortunately, it was. No, a few of my mates were into that. I must admit I didn't like school. I went to North Kelvinside School in Maryhill Road, and kind of left about, I don't know, third year stroke fourth year. I didn't go an awful lot in fourth year. I didn't get any qualifications. I think I got an F for history or something. But
what did you get for English, mate?
Didn't sit it. I wasn't interested. First 2 years at North Kelvinside Secondary School, I did really well because my maths teacher was a psychopath, and I get straight A's first and second year for maths, and that was fine because he more or less bullied us into listening and being good. But then I started playing for the football team and started hanging about with a few boys, and I stayed I'd moved up to a wee place called Codder by that time, which was about 2 miles from NK, and I just get fed up. I just get fed up with school and decided enough was enough, and something had to give. It was school, although I didn't tell my ma. She thought I was going every day. I'd already sold my travel pass for 10 pence, so I couldn't get there. So I was just going and playing football and doing other things. But
so
no,
there was the inclination there that you were going to become an author. Nothing.
No, absolutely not. I was interested, for the first, second year, but other things took over. But the one thing that remained a constant, the one thing that has remained a constant throughout my life, through any childhood or adult traumas, has been Rangers. I've never ever stopped going to games. Never. Even when other things were happening around about me. I mean, I remember getting dragged away on holiday to Fife or something when I was about 16, and we got to Fife. It was I can't remember what day it was. It was either Wednesday or Saturday. And we got to Fife about 4 o'clock, and I immediately set off back home for Ibrox to see the Terence Caledonian Cup match, and hitched down the road. My mum was going crazy.
So,
but
when would that be?
Mid-70s?
Aye.
Mid to late 70s.
Okay.
I just hated missing games, friendlies, anything. I was just there, rain, hail or shine. I just loved it. I just couldn't get enough of it. And then obviously when I got a wee bit older, I was away in Europe, all the European away matches and the bus as well.
What developed?
What
developed the passion for writing? What developed your passion for writing? Did you take notes?
It came back. It came back because I started in STV when I was 16, and then I got to know a few of the journalists and stuff, and I seen what they were doing, and I thought, I started thinking, there's a wee chance here if you can. I was 16, just turned 16. I started as the boy in the general stores making the tea for the drivers and helping them out with bits and pieces and stuff. But the camera store was next to us, and the guys would come down and practice with cameras, and they would let me, mess about with them and stuff. And then I moved into the stage department. I was working in studios and working with a lot of journalists, and I realised that there was chances to do things with your life rather than just do what I was doing. So I then started indulging in writing. And while I was at STV, I started a Rangers fanzine, which I used to write in the crew room in an old typewriter in the corner. So I did the fanzine for a couple of years, and then just sort of progressed from there. I started doing covering Speedway for the papers, and then moved on to covering matches, and then I started writing books. So it's just been a big progression all the way up, and I never thought for a minute I would be doing books for prominent Rangers players, ex-Rangers players, but it's worked out really well. It's worked out really well, and it's just taken one stage, gone from one stage to the next, and just kept it going.
Was the planning when you go to your first book, which was, let people know what your first book was?
What was my first book? I think my first book was 50 Years of Scottish Television,
right?
Which I decided to write many years ago, and I was working.
Is my mate got a chapter in that book?
Who's that?
Does my mate get a chapter in that book?
Oh, your mate Yogi?
Yeah. No. The other one.
Oh, the other guy. Aye, I know who you are. I know who you're talking about. Yes, he has. Aye.
All right.
But that was a bit of a letdown because of honestly can't remember if that was my first one or not. But that was a bit of a letdown because STV were going to publish a big coffee table style book, which really thrilled me. And then I wrote a story about Taggart being axed, and they took the huff with me and decided they weren't going to do it. So I just published it myself. So self-publishing it gave me a wee look into how the other side of it worked, and the amount of work that was involved in. Not just writing the book and getting the interviews and doing the research and getting the photographs and then writing the book but selling it as well and marketing it and trying to get it published somewhere. And then I had an idea to write a book about Jock Wallace, because Jock Wallace was one of my idols. And I went up to Ottakar's bookshop when Ottakar's was still a thing, and I just checked I went in and looked at all the football books and seen who the publishers were and wrote to them. And Pitch Publishing got back to me, and I've since written, I think, about a dozen books for them. They've published all my Rangers ones, so they've been great.
How do you plan then? How do you plan writing a book? Obviously, we'll use the subject of Jock Wallace. How do you go about planning that?
Well, that was what I did. What I did first was I just kind of started researching Jock Wallace and getting lots of notes, and then seeing, and then once I had a lot of material, I started splitting it up into chapters. It's dead easy just to, if you're writing about somebody's life and career, it's quite easy to do it just in chronological order, and start with a significant event in a sort of prologue, and then go back to the start and, you know, write it chapters 1 to 20 or whatever. But I wanted to try and speak to as many people as I could and as many players as I could. And for that book, I tracked down kind of obscure players that played for Leicester when he was manager, Motherwell and stuff like that, as well as speaking to loads of ex-Rangers players. Spoke to virtually all the Barcelona Bears at one event, which was fantastic. I think I might have mentioned it last time I was on. A mate of mine told me to come to the Holiday Inn. He says, the Hilton, sorry. He said, just come to the Hilton. I says, I can't get away from working. He says, and I was working along at the Clydeside at that time, and he says, I need to say to my boss. And so I developed this sort of rapid toothache that I just started holding my mouth, and within 3 minutes I'd left, said I had to go to the dentist. I don't know if he believed me or not, but I then drove up to the Hilton and went in, and there was all the Barcelona Bears, including the late great Sandy Jardine, John Gregg, Ali McDonald, late Colin Jackson. All these guys were all there, and it was just this was the players I'd grown up with. You know, this was the players I idolised.
Were you starstruck, Jeff? Were you starstruck?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt.
Who would you have been your hero in that group?
Colin Steen.
Colin Steen, right? Okay. He's a character, Colin.
I've never spoke. I've only spoke to him briefly, and that was interviewing him that day for the book. But I heard he's a really nice guy. I spoke to him spoke to him once or twice very briefly. But when that book came out, I got in touch with Colin Jackson and said I wanted to give a lot of the profits to the Rangers Former Players Benevolent Fund that helps players that fall in hard times. And Colin was great, and we organised a series of book signings, and he got a lot of the guys along to Ibrox we had a lunch at the Rangers shop, which seems to be something that's really difficult to do these days, but you know, we'll keep plugging away. But the manager wasn't really interested, and I kept plugging away, and I'm quite persistent when I start, and eventually I got him to agree to a book signing on the night of the Rangers United game when we were in League One. And we did it that night, and we had Colin Steen and Willie Johnson and Ali McDonald, and just all the guys. You know, it was brilliant. I'm sitting there, and I ended up just letting them sit and sign the books because, you know, the manager of the shop says, "Oh, you're the author, you should sit there," but I just didn't feel worthy at all, so I just got up.
There's a pecking order, you know your place.
Absolutely. I just got up and looked at them for an hour. But that manager who was apparently or allegedly a Celtic season ticket holder, you know, right. He was going to take 50 books, and then eventually talked him into taking 125, and we still sold out before the end of the book signing. So I don't know what it is about Rangers and the Rangers shop, but they don't seem to want to make money for some reason. You know, you're trying. There's a lot of people trying to get stuff in. You know, people that are saying, "Look, it's genuine." Even the Barcelona guys were having they brought out Rangers stuff a while back through the Former Players Benevolent Club, and even they were struggling to get stuff in their own shop. You know, so I don't know what it is.
If you said League One, there would have still the shop would have been owned by obviously still Sports Direct at the time.
Would it have been 2014?
They would have done.
Would that have been Sports Direct? The manager was based in Ibrox. He had an office in Ibrox, so maybe it was a joint ownership or something. I don't think Sports Direct owned it, did they outright?
No, they ended up with a long-term lease for it, mate. That's my
understanding. Right, okay.
So if the Castore boys are listening, the Rangers shop's not just about T-shirts, tracksuits, football tops. It's about their whole history, and could be a place once they organise it and get it sorted, yeah?
Oh, it would be. I think it'd be amazing because Pitch Publishing's got quite a few Rangers authors that have brought out some great books, and half the price of each book is going to the club. So I don't know. What's not you like, Even ducks. Let's get some new rubber ducks in.
There's nothing wrong with that, mate. Nothing. I had to get one box swanner in for his birthday. Right, so you've done your Jock Wallace one, and you've listed there's some great books, and obviously I've listed them all, but there's one thing I want to ask you, yeah? We had a show last week, and we talked about one of your next books in 1986 was the Rangers Revolution, smashing time for people of a certain era because it was a golden age and the excitement when Souness walked in the door. We had a debate last week about the Souness era and the Gerrard era, and we ended up, I think, with 8 people on the call at the time, and we couldn't split it. The impact of both had. Do you see any similarities, mate?
Definitely, there's a lot of similarities. I think the Souness era. I mean, the 1986 book for me was good because it showed 2 real sides of Rangers. It started off, when Jock Wallace and Alec Taunton were in charge, and we didn't have that much success. And then, midway through the year, Graham Souness comes in. So it was really a year of 2 halves. But the impact Souness had on, I was running the bus with Mary Hill at the time, and the impact Souness had was unbelievable because at that time, I ran the Sandbank bus from Mary Hill, and at that time we were really struggling. Supporters club were folding. We were sharing with a club from Holytown because we couldn't get people to go to games. We had maybe 10, 15 people wanting to go to the games every week. When Souness arrived, there wasn't a seat to be had in the bus. That was the impact. And then obviously the associated problems that come with that is tickets, and then back to square one. But that was it was just box office. That was the impact. And we all remember the first game at Easter Road where Souness was there, and you had guys like Chris Woods in goals and Terry Butcher and these guys. Not every signing they made was a massive name, but and the thing with Souness was any player didn't make an impact. He wasn't slow in getting shot at them. Souness brought instant success, didn't he? More or less brought success right away. Gerrard hasn't done that.
That luck involved, I know, mate. You get the bounce of the ball. Obviously, we could have went out East Fife in penalty kicks.
Absolutely. Aye.
So
every game wasn't 4 or 5-0. Far from it. We were struggling through games. But the thing was, we seem to have a mentality in that team with players that could get us through games. I don't think, I might be completely wrong here, but I'm not so sure that this mid-season collapse would have happened under Souness. I don't think he'd have put up with it. Or these players would have been a certain mentality that wouldn't have allowed that. They would have fought their way through it. Because I don't think Celtic are the most wonderful team in the world, and yet, last season, I thought last season was a big chance, and we completely blew it. And it was so frustrating because at Christmas we were touching distance, weren't we? I know there was still
we were a better situation than what Souness's team was. Yeah, this time.
Aye. But I mean, it was enjoyment because we had watched mediocre Rangers teams for a couple of years under John Gregan and Jock Wallace, and when Souness came in, he brought some flair players. It showed you. I mean, like that, we still had David Cooper, who was another real hero of mine, and then it wasn't that long until Cooper couldn't really get a game. So, he was the team was constantly evolving under Souness. I know he had a lot, maybe he had a lot more money than Gerrard. Gerrard's had money to spend as well, but Souness certainly went for it. And
when you done that book, the 1986 Rangers Revolution, I would trust anybody, advise anybody to get it. All your books are great reads for our support, but for a certain vintage, it's a great read. Did you get to speak to Graham?
No, it turned out it didn't. I tried to get him, and I couldn't get him. He was apparently really busy in Sky Sports, and then he was busy selling his house, and then he was doing this and doing that. And my son was working down in Southampton at the time, and I think Graham must stay down that way. And he met him at the airport, and he went up and says, "Hi Graham," he says, "Any chance to get a photograph with you?" He went, "Aye, sure." He says, "Listen, my dad's been trying to phone you." And he says, "Well, what for?" And he says, "No, it's okay. He's no after you, and he just wants to interview you for his book." When I was telling him to give me a phone, but he never gave a number. I was obviously trying to get his number through various channels. But then when we did the Mark Walters book, Graham did the foreword, so
right.
He phoned me for that, but it was a bit late. But we had a laugh about it, and he apologised for not getting in touch with me, even though I hadn't actually physically got in touch with him. But it would have been nice to speak to him, but I didn't think it was necessary. Some people might disagree, but I wanted to speak to a real Broad Ranger, people that had been involved that season, that year, 1986. You know, half the people under Jock Wallace, and some of the people that played for Jock Wallace and never made it under Souness, and people that did make it under Souness, and then people that Souness had signed. So I thought it worked out quite well. The people we spoke to, like Chris Woods, and that was good. You know, Chris was a goalkeeping coach at West Ham at the time, and he was fantastic. He would have talked all day. You know, so what I wanted to do then was sort of have a chapter on a player, and then have a chapter on a month or a year, and then another player. And so I quite liked that. You know, rather than have a whole book about a person, just it was like a mini biography to start with, and then them talking about that particular year. So I thought that idea worked quite well. And then I tried to replicate it in the 1992-93 season for that book, which I thought again worked quite well. It was good.
That was again a special season. A roller coaster, 44 games undefeated, against some fabulous teams. The champions are Denmark, the champions England, the champions are Russia, champions are France.
That's right, Belgium.
Belgium, undefeated, mate. Just we never seen it coming, and turns out we were robbed, mate. You don't think you should write that?
We certainly were, because I spoke to a former director who wouldn't go on the record, but he told me that he personally had been the guy, the Bernard Tapie, the president of Marseille, had tried to bribe him in Ibrox the night before the match when they were having a dinner, and he'd offered them money to throw the game, and the director offered to kick him down the marble staircase. You know, so it was strange times, but when you think that's how close, and that's maybe how frightened they were of Rangers, that they went to these lengths. And then obviously the next night they were 2-0 up, weren't they? But they pulled it back to 2 each. But we had the measure of these teams, but maybe when you watch the way that Marseille moved the ball about, Marseille were really quick. They moved the ball about well, but we had no little amount of skill in the team, but we had so much desire in that team. 1992-93 team is just my favourite ever Rangers team for commitment and spirit and desire, and just all that stuff that can get you through times when you're maybe not playing at your best or whatever. The heart that these players had in 92-93 was just second to none. Best ever team for that.
Robbed a quadruple, mate. Robbed.
Absolutely. Aye. Still rankles, because it brought it all back when I was writing that book and I was starting to get angry again. At these bloody French. They could have. I mean,
Marseille were a good side. They didn't need to go to the lengths, did they?
No, they didn't. And that was the thing. Because did they not put 6 past the Russians? CSK Moscow.
I heard Bernard did that in his Cooten, you know what I mean?
That's right, aye. Well, his Cooten was nearly rearranged that night at Ibrox.
It was a great season, mate. Again, anybody that wants to read that book, great read. Younger bears maybe don't quite grasp how successful we were that year. Is just unbelievable. A roller coaster for the European tie. The first league of the Champions League, when the Champions League was the Champions League, Jeff.
And Ian Durant as well. I mean, I I still think to this day that Ian Durrant's probably one of the greatest homegrown midfielders. That's not just that we've had that's ever been seen in Scottish football. What a player! What a midfielder! His runs through midfield into the box were just legendary, and that was him coming back with that injury after that Thug had named him. He was just such a great player. I just really, really, really loved Ian Durrant. But I mean, it could have been even better, but I think we're still seeing great times for Durrant. He was just awesome.
In that cup final, the cup final one is a treble, mate. It's a fabulous game. We played it over at their place because Hampden was getting done up, and what cup final it was, and the majority of people on the park were Scottish. It's hard to believe how.
Aye, that's right. Aye, doesn't happen now, does it? The majority of our team are Scousers now. But there you go. I don't mind fairly comfy. If we can win the league this year, that'll do me.
No, that's what the change was when Souness came in. Right, so that's just a flavour of some of the books you've wrote, yeah? You've wrote for
absolutely.
You've wrote about the Old Firm games. You've wrote about Mark Walters. The greatest Ranger ever was somebody that was very close to your heart. You had a different opinion. You said it the last time you were on, but just for the people who still heard you, your greatest Ranger ever was different for a lot of people.
Well, that was what it was. I remember John Gregg was voted the greatest Ranger. I think it was 1999, and I grew up in the Gregg era, but I grew up in the days just as Gregg was getting a bit past his best. And when he was voted the greatest Ranger ever, I thought there must be. Aye, but there again, there you go. That's his. John Gregg was a great player, but one of his greatest qualities was he was a fantastic leader. He had great commitment, desire, again, all that stuff, But greatest player, no. So I looked back and I was looking through a lot of stuff, and I kept this one name kept coming up all the time, and it was Davy Meiklejohn, who played from sort of 1920s to the late 1930s, won something like 12 or 13 leagues with Rangers. But when I started researching Davy Meiklejohn, I read every single match report that he ever played in, and I thought, this guy is just something else. This guy virtually played in the same position that Gregg played in at the start of his career, was right half. Gregg went to left back, etc. But Meiklejohn sort of switched between centre half and right half. Kind of played either central defence or maybe a more forward role in midfield. But he was the master of the crossfield pass. He was just a superb tactician. Of course, that was the days when the manager ruled. If it was said that if once the teams crossed, the line went onto the pitch, the captain was in charge, and the captain would make any tactical changes. There was no subs in those days, so any changes in the park, the captain would do it, or it was said that Meiklejohn would have walked off if Bill Struth had tried to interfere with the tactics during the game. But Meiklejohn was just something else, and he was a big gentleman as well. Never lived any more than 10 miles from Ibrox all his life. Lived round the corner in Copeland Road as well, and he just seemed such an immense player, and that I really enjoyed that one, because it was round about that time I really started taking an interest in Rangers history. As far as we all know quite a lot of the history, but when you dig deeper, you find out a lot more things, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, and it was sort of the beginning of me really enjoying the history of the club. Nothing to do with the fact that we weren't winning the league or anything, I had to look back to get my fix of glory. But I thoroughly enjoyed that era with guys like Davy Meiklejohn and Jerry Dawson and Alan Morton and all these players. There was some fantastic players in. And although you don't get to see them, a lot of match reports from that era, you feel as if you're actually at the match, because the terms they use are so flowery and so descriptive. So you do get a real feel for being at the match. So Davy Meiklejohn, I reckon, probably the greatest ever Ranger.
It's all about opinions, isn't it? You'll never change.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
People's opinions, It's sometimes hard to comment on people you've not seen, but I never seen Baxter live, but there's no doubt he was as a player, he was absolutely different class for a lot of the players through our history. But do you think it's the history of the club being so so wide, mate, that makes us the club we are, mate.
Oh, aye. I mean, knowing the world over, aren't we? We always have been, because even when Rangers went on tour to America in, I think it was 1928, they got off the boat and there was apparently, no phones, internet, nothing, and there was apparently a whole load of American journalists waiting to interview Nico John, because they all knew who he was, because that was the fame, the fame that Rangers were the most famous club in the world. They were the best team in Europe at the time in the 20s and 30s. They were unbeaten. In fact, they lost their first game. They lost their first game in 1932, I think it was, in the German tour, but they had just come off the back of a really tough season and then played 6 games in Germany. They were playing 6 in Germany and 1 in Austria, and it was their last match in Germany. They played something like 6 games in 9 days. It was ridiculous, and they lost one of them. And it was a bit of a shame, but they were unbeaten. But they were just famous the world over. Anywhere football was played, Rangers was the name. And I think there's a lot of things going to making that happen. Obviously the star names and your Dalstruths and all your great players, but the stadium as well. The fact that we have full houses for every game. We've won a European trophy. Won the league a record number of times. I think all these components just go into the mix, and when it's all said and done, they just make up the fact that Rangers are the most famous club in the world still. I know you've got Barcelona and Real Madrid and all these teams, but we've consistently, been really famous for a long, over 100 years. So it's a long time, Ox, and it's just, we've earned it, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, something that could have been levelled at our fans, Jeff, and I'm going to come back and then we'll go forward a bit and then we'll go back, because I obviously want to go into a new bit. Something that could level our fans. Well, your success, your sports success, you go along with your winning. And there always was a bit of that with most teams before season tickets. But I think in the last decade, our fans have showed how dedicated they are.
I think so. I think we probably lost a few fans when we went down to Division 3, but we gained more. And the crowd since, as you say, the last decade, but even taking it the last 8 years since we were in Division 3, I mean, there's maybe a bit of, siege mentality built in there, but most of the fans were there for genuine reasons and wanted to support the team through hard times, and and the record numbers of fans that went to away games, all these wee grounds, and I think we quite enjoyed the journey. I mean, that's probably one of my favourite books when I put some words to Willie Bass's great pictures, and we brought out that book, The Journey. It just sort of encapsulated everything. Again, he was another string to Rangers' bow. We were down there, and it wasn't just a case of, we're down and we're out. We're anything but out. We went there, and it was part of the atmospheres at all the away games, and a lot of fans went to grounds they'd never been in their life, and it was just another chapter in we're long and illustrious history, as far as I'm concerned.
Aye, and obviously sometimes what kills you, sometimes doesn't kill you, can make you stronger, doesn't it? And that's what seems to happen.
Aye, I think so.
Right, so I want to go to your latest book, yeah?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you're on here because you've got a book out, because that's not the case at all, but we contacted you because we wanted you to use history. A guy who is a name known to all the Rangers supporters, a tragic tale, but as a striker, there's a big story to be told. I don't want you to ruin the book, but what a player, and there's a guy who is part of the fabric of our history, Jeff.
Aye, it's a case of, it's not just a case of what might have been. He's still the record league goal scorer. He's still got the 44 league goals in his first ever season in senior football. I mean, that's just phenomenal. It's just the goals Sam English scored are just. He was born in, it was Ireland back in those days. It was there the sort of football landscape in Ireland at that time was changing. They were kind of getting into being divided north and south. When Sam played this Ireland, the South Ireland had their own team. Although the sort of association was run from the Ireland team was run from Belfast, but Sam was born just south of Coleraine in a wee place called Crevelly, near just above Garver, and his family moved from there when Sam was 18 months, and they came over to Glasgow. They were supposed to go to Canada, but it fell through. They couldn't sell the farm, so they moved to. There was opportunities in Glasgow, so they moved to the Dalmuir area of Glasgow, just outside Glasgow, and he worked in the shipyards when he was of age. And he was just a real natural footballer, not just a goal scorer, but it was 18, 19 years old, and he was kicking really well with both feet. He was strong. He was only 5'7.5". He was strong. He was great in the air. He was fast, and it was said that by the time he went to Rangers, he was one of the first centre forwards that would hold up play and bring in his players rather than just always bearing down and goal. In those days, a centre forward was a centre forward, and they more or less stayed in the same position and didn't go looking for the ball. The guys. I mean, one of the first things he did when he was told when he went into the Ibrox dressing room was, Alan Morton says to him, "Don't you come looking for me." He says, "You just stay in the box and I'll find you." So that gives you an idea of how the game was played in those days. But Sam English was different. He wanted to. If he wasn't involved in the action, he wanted to go and get involved in it rather than just wait for the ball to come to him. And Rangers then soon started playing more or less to suit his style. Even though he was only 20, 21 years old, and he had all these great names around him. He was in awe of them in the dressing room. But then as soon as he got out in the park, these guys were sort of playing to his tune, which was something new for Rangers. And Struth, to his credit, obviously seen that this was going to benefit the team in the long run, and just allowed it to happen because he would be giving all the guys their orders before they went out. And but Sam English was, I personally think Sam English was a real one-off, and I think he would have went on to score hundreds of goals for Rangers had he not been involved in the incident with John Thompson.
44 league goals. I mean, obviously, he came for junior football like a lot of the players did back then, yeah? It wasn't unusual for any of the top pros to play junior, whereas now people think, Scotland was a different place. Junior football was really competitive.
There wasn't a massive difference in class between junior and senior back then. There was the Scottish Junior League had a lot of really, really good teams in the West region, but 3 years before Sam English moved to Rangers, there was a break in the associations, and what happened was a lot of the bigger teams like Pollock and Ashfield and Yoker and Bridgeton, Waverley, and these teams were sick fed up that the senior teams coming in and just poaching their players and taking them away without any recompense. So they made their feelings known to the Scottish Junior Football Association. They didn't feel as if they'd taken it seriously. So they decided to break away and form the Scottish Intermediate Junior League, and all the best teams went to the intermediates. Now, a couple of years before that, Sam had played for Old Kilpatrick and played for Port Glasgow, and just at the start of the intermediate stuff, he moved to Yoker, and he went up to the Yoker guys come up to his house one weekend and says to his dad, "We want to sign your son. How do you feel about that?" And his dad said, "Oh, you're wasting your time. He's never in any night before 10. Nowadays, nobody goes out before 10. So he says he's out dancing every night. So, he decided to take the signing on fee and just thought he would go and play. And that team, that Yoker team was just sort of missing somebody to score goals. They had a great team. They had a fantastic goalkeeper and a fantastic defence, and the midfield was outstanding. In fact, Colin Stewart, that works at Ibrox, with the youths and the former players, his uncle played in the midfield and made many goals for Sam. I remember Colin telling me he got taken up to see him once and just to speak to him, and he just stood there, this guy played for Rangers when Colin was only a wee boy. Davy Stewart they called him Crafty Davy. He was the guy that pulled the strings in midfield. So Sam was the sort of missing link in that Yoker team, and he did well, first season. But bearing in mind he was still only 18, and he was in the junior game then was really really tough. He had a lot of tough guys and playing around about then for a lot of the mining villages and stuff. And Sam could really handle himself. He was never a player that went out looking for trouble, but he was a kind of robust 5'7.5", and he handled himself well, and that was another reason why he was so successful. But he scored just under 300 goals in 3 seasons for Yoker.
That's amazing.
That tells you all you need to know, doesn't it? 7-1 game against Petershill when Yoker beat them 15-1, and Petershill were favourites to win that day. And Yoker had a man sent off in 20 minutes, and Yoker won 15-1. In fact, I think it was 8 at half time, and the Petershill goalkeeper refused to go out for the second half. He went, "I'm not going to play." He says, "I'm not going to play in front of play behind Daddies." That was Sam English was just the absolute darling of Yoker. He was there for 3 years, and then his move, obviously he couldn't get a move because the Scottish Football Association had banned their clubs from signing in intermediates. So it meant that none of the players could get a move, but it also meant that Yoker had time. They could keep all the players and they had time to get a good side gelled together, and that's what they did. And they won the league and they won the Scottish Cup and stuff like that. So, and it was obviously Sam's goals were a big part in that.
So how did he get his move? With his contract be up, or? Well,
there was in those days, even at senior level with Rangers, you only signed. The contract was only for 1 year. Although what they did was the team that if you played for Rangers at the end of that season, you could only move if Rangers didn't want you. So what they did was they paid you winter wages and summer wages. So your winter wages when you were playing were better, and then you would get a sort of retainer throughout the summer months if they wanted to keep you. So the players were signed on a season by season basis, which was a wee bit different from now. The teams sort of held all the aces, but with the intermediate dispute being over, then it was a field day. Everybody was out looking for all the best players, and out the whole of the juniors, Sam was sort of being touted as the number one catch, and all the top English teams and top Scottish teams were all after him. Everybody wanted him, but Yoker were keen for him not to sign for Rangers because the transfer fees were capped if he went to a Scottish team, but if he went to an English team, then sky was the limit. And Arsenal manager Herbert Chapman, legendary figure at the club, he just days after an operation, and he travelled up to Glasgow to try and sign him. He was staying at the St Neots Hotel, and Yoker asked Sam to go and speak to Herbert Chapman, which he said he would do. They made it known to him that was their preferred choice, preferred destination for him, but he said he wanted to go and see Bill Street as well, and he met Bill Street at midnight after being at Herbert Chapman's, and agreed there and then to sign for Rangers. But Bill Street had been bunging him money for the last couple of years. A wee brown envelope would arrive at John Brown Shipyards for him with a couple of pound in it, so this wasn't daft. He knew what he wanted. Nah, he was a wily old fox. But that was actually, so he agreed to sign for Rangers, but he was still playing into July. The juniors still played into July, and then sort of had a week off and then started again, because there was 70 and 80 games in their season. At the start of the season, they played, I think it was 20 games in August. So they were sometimes playing 2 and 3 nights in a row. It wouldn't have been unheard of for them to play Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then Friday and Saturday. That was just the way it was, and they've just gone with it. And then their crowds were really good as well. Yoker were getting some 8, 9, 10,000 for some of the league games. So
people can comprehend that now. Some of our top tier teams don't get anywhere near that now.
Oh God! I mean, they would keel over if they asked to play 3 times a week. Never mind 3 nights in a row. But these boys were all hardy and fit, and that was just the normal. So they just got on with it. But so then when he left, he signed for Rangers, Yoka was still playing, so I think they still had 3 cup finals to play, or a couple of semis at least. But he was then given a couple of weeks off, and he went on holiday, then came back and started pre-season training. And it more or less went from playing for Yoka, signing for Rangers, having a week off, come back, pre-season training, one trial game, no pre-season friendlies, one trial game, and then straight into the league. That's the way it worked for him. And then we know he scored 7 goals in his first 2 games for Rangers. So it was just a machine. You know, it was.
But that era, when you researched that era, you mentioned Struth picking boys at the shipyards as people all over England and Scotland, but they got people at the pits, etc. Would it be trying to get the working class boys who showed potential and hunger for the game? Wouldn't it be unusual what Struth done then?
Well, it was more working class boys that played football anyway. You know, it was never anything other than a working class sport. It's just a way of, you know, alleviating the tedious stuff of the 9-to-5 jobs. You know, it was just that was what it did. I mean, these boys worked really hard all week, and then they were playing, you know, sometimes 3 and 4 games a week for their junior sides. So I suppose going into a big team like Rangers, getting proper training, it was only going to make them better. And I think that was borne out by, you know, what you mentioned earlier, Ox, about Sam English scoring 44 league goals in his debut season. And to think that, well, he did that in season 31-32, and that's still a record, you know, nearly 100 years on. So, and you think if MD was going to get near that, it'd been Ali McCoist, but Coisty never really get that close, to be honest. Jim Forrest looked as if he might do it in the 60s, and then obviously Marco Negri, I think, would have done it.
Oh, what you've done there.
Had he not get injured.
Did you happen to write a book about Marco Negri?
Oh no, I couldn't speak to him after losing his 10 in a row, even though it wasn't him. It was Sergio Parini's fault. That was a real sickener, because had he, there's no way in this earth we would not have won 10 in a row if he had stayed fit. So this season wouldn't be that significant. It's a funny old world, isn't it? What did we say about cliches?
That season when he appeared, mate, McCoist was a good finisher, but for that 5 or 6 months when Negri appeared, it was unbelievable. The goals he scored, the different type of goals. But,
that was Sam English.
Was it?
That was what Sam English did, all sorts of goals. Goals with the head and goals with both feet.
Okay, brilliant. So Sam's playing with Yoka. He's then signed for Rangers. He's kept up his Irish connection and played for Ireland, or was there no chance because
he was overlooked? Overlooked in his first season with Rangers when he was banging all the goals, and he was overlooked by Ireland. They had a couple of good strikers at that time, but I disagree that they'd end better than Sam English. But Bill Struth kind of put the mix in for him a bit, which wasn't. He insisted that if Sam English played for Ireland, they played at centre forward, and the Irish, quite rightly, the Irish selector come back and says, "Well, why are you demanding that Sam English plays at centre forward?" He says, "You played him at outside right last week," and he's like, "Oh, aye, right, aye." So he did. So I did, and that was the second season, because he didn't play for Ireland in his first season when he was banging all the goals in. He played a couple of games for them the following season when he wasn't banging the goals in. You know, because by that time his head wasn't in a great place. So, but he still played. He still played and scored for Ireland and made 2 appearances for them, which was decent. They had a guy at that time called Jimmy Dunn, who played for Sheffield United, who scored in the record amount of English First Division matches, which was only recently almost beaten by Jamie Vardy. But I think Jamie Vardy came up a bit short. And Jimmy Dunn was a controversial character because he was from the South Island and he had served time in jail for membership of the IRA. So it was between Sam and him they didn't have numbers in the back in those days, but it would have been a number 9 jersey. They had numbers. So it was between him and Jimmy Dunn. And he came up against him. One of his first games for Liverpool was against Sheffield United, and he came up against Dunn. So I'm sure he got on okay in the national team, but he was just a guy that had he would call principles, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the For people who've not got it, what have you called your book about Sam English?
I've called it Tortured because
Right.
I feel as if...
How did you come up with that name, mate? What was the development?
I feel as if...
Story?
I spoke at great length to his son-in-law, who was married to Sam's youngest daughter, and he probably knew Sam better than MD. And he went to played golf with him, and eventually when he got Sam to go back to the football, he went to him and did a wee tour of eyebrows and all that stuff, and went to Partick Thistle because a couple of Sam's ex teammates were there. And I just got the impression that, you know, he was a tortured soul because of what had happened on September the 5th, 1931. And I thought it summed up his life. I spoke to his family about it. The family members that I was dealing with at the time and interviewing and stuff, and I spoke to them and they kind of agreed. So I don't like long-winded titles. So if you can get one word to sum up somebody or somebody's life, then I think that was quite appropriate.
Obviously, the funny, there is pictures of the accident that you've seen. Well, it's clear anybody sees it. It was an accident and a tragic accident, yeah?
Absolutely. No doubt. No. I was obviously...
You weren't at all. You're not at all.
No, I missed the game that day. I wasn't
well.
I was always of the impression that Sam English was the guy who was responsible, you know, for his death. But that was just wrong. You know, that was just completely wrong. That was just the way I'd been brought up, just the stories I'd heard when I was watching Rangers, because, you know, it was way, way, way before my time. Mm-hmm. So it was one of these things, and I was more or less. I didn't know an awful lot about Sam English or the incident, but you kind of had always heard of Sam English and John Thompson and knew that an incident had taken place and a match at Ibrox. But then when I actually started to look into it, you can see the incident. It's on Pathé News, and you can see it, and it's quite quick, but it's described in a lot of the match reports as Jimmy Fleming puts a ball down the middle for Sam to chase, and just as the ball reaches the sort of 18-yard line, John Thompson had made a move from his goal line and come out, hesitated in the 6-yard line, and then moved again. Now, this was an eyewitness report from Sunday Express photographer behind the goal, and John Thompson was himself in a goalkeeping masterclass had said, never hesitate. If you're going to come out, come out. If you're not going to come out, don't come out. And he hesitated and he lost that vital second. And then he came out to sort of narrow the angle right in front of the goal, up in line with the penalty spot. And Sam English put his foot, sliced it, cut across the ball to try and make the ball go around him. Anyway, it went about a foot past the post. But John Thompson, having stopped, then was a wee bit behind that. Sam English had got to the ball and all the rest of it first, and he came out, dived. He was a very, very brave young man, and his head hit off the inside of Sam English's knee. Sam then stumbled and fell. John Thompson fell, and then the rest was just stuff of real tragedy.
So obviously you can understand how it affected the guy psychologically. Obviously,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Aye.
And the guy that, in your opinion, when you're writing the book, never recovered from it.
I don't think he did. He said himself he did. He was never one. In those days, players never really spoke to the press. You know, some of the press at the big papers had their pals. You know, Rangers and Celtic, and they would maybe get a wee word now and again. But as a rule, there was no features on players. There was no interviews. It was sometimes with managers, and that was about it. Bill Struth very rarely spoke. Scott Simon very rarely spoke. So it's very hard to get a flavour of what people were thinking. But in 1963, the Daily Express did a really big interview with Sam English. He sat down and he decided to give his feelings, which provided maybe a real valuable insight into how he was thinking, even though it was a number of years after the tragedy. But he said at first all he got was sympathy. He's from players, fans. He says, but it slowly grew into hatred. and he tried. He says when he was on the park, he tried his best he could to get on with the game. As shows in the first season, he was obviously scoring lots of goals and stuff. Second season he tailed off. He was getting it really, really strongly from the fans. I mean, the players would call him a murderer and a killer, and he says. In fact, the game after the next Old Firm game after the game of the game of September the 5th, Rangers played Celtic in the Glasgow Cup semi-final, and after half an hour or something, Sam went up for the ball with the Celtic goalkeeper Falconer and caught his jaw with his head, and the guy went down and didn't move. Next minute, the Celtic players started grabbing him, and you think, oh shit, here we go again. But obviously, the Rangers players then waded in to protect Sam English, but the boy got up, and that was okay, and then they got on with the game. But you just think, God, if it happened again, it's just you've got yourself, Fox, in football, you're contacting, you've got to go for if you've got 50-50s and stuff like that. But by all accounts, he was never a dirty player.
Mm-hmm. But then the game was physical. You could charge goalkeepers. It was a lot more physical.
Exactly. It was different.
So
and there was one in that game, in that Rangers Celtic match, there was one incident where the fans, it was really, the fans were quite unruly in those days in the 20s and 30s, and they were really quite violent and unruly. And there was a lot of fights, and there was a lot of rioting and stuff. And one of them threw a bottle. One Celtic fan threw a bottle at the Rangers player as he went to take a corner, and the Rangers player picked up the bottle and kidded on he was going to throw it back at them. And it looked as if the crowd were going to come on the park. And Davy Meiklejohn said to Sam English, "Get yourself into the centre of the park, son, away from them." And he said, "No, if they want me, I'm not moving." Because they thought that would end up being a good excuse for them to come on and have a go at him. But because it wasn't uncommon for the crowd to come onto the field in those days. But he stood there and he says no, he stood his ground, and that was it. So it was a really tough time.
When you research the actual incident, I mean, it's not an incident for point scoring or club rivalry, but could you feel as if it was portrayed by a certain team as if, or because there was no internet there, so how would they?
No, not at the time, because well, it's sort of mixed feelings about it. It was obviously, there was a fatal accident inquiry in which Willie Maley was asked if he thought it was an accident, and he says, "I hope it was." Right, and that's just shocking thing to say. But having spoke to David Mason about Willie Maley and researched him myself, he never ever came across as a really bitter, angry, aggressive towards Rangers. I mean, after one cup final, Rangers won the cup final, he went into the Rangers dressing room and shook hands with every player individually. So I don't know if you'd maybe give the guy the benefit of the doubt and say, well, he's opened his mouth and he said something wrong. Should have retracted it, because that statement caused Sam English a lot of problems. Afterwards, Sam English was found completely innocent at that fatal accident inquiry by both club doctors, by the referee, by everybody else that was involved, and then Willie Maley admitted they hadn't even seen the incident. So that was I thought that was naughty, even nasty, and it shouldn't have been said. But then there was
the gallery.
Sorry,
was Mr. Maley playing to the gallery?
I don't know, and I wouldn't have liked to think so. But Sam remarked on that comment many years later and says that he couldn't for the life of him understand why such an esteemed man would say something like that. Now it was after the incident, a few days later, there was a memorial service in Glasgow for him, and Sam English was there, and Davy Meiklejohn was reading one of the lessons in the church, and Celtic captain McStay couldn't even get through the crowd. The crowds were that vast, and Sam English was going in, and there was people round about him, trying to shield him, and there was he reckoned there was more pity than aggression towards him at that point, because it was only a couple of days after it. He said there was two women looking at him, and one of them says, "Oh, but he's so young," and Sam English says, "Well, they seemed disappointed that that he couldn't give me more stick because I was only young." And then when he went to the funeral a few days later up in Fife, he was in the burial ground, and Alan Morton asked the police to form a cordon around him because it looked like there might be some hostility towards him. And John Thompson's mum and dad made a public statement saying they exonerated him of any blame. It was absolutely nothing to do. It was a complete accident. John Thompson's brother was at the game and seen it, and he didn't think for a minute there was anything malicious. So the people that mattered, they were like, no, it wasn't Sam English's fault. There was no blame attached to him whatsoever. It seemed to be ignorance, and it could be the fact that because it was in rivals and point scoring and all the rest of it. When I interviewed Sam's son-in-law, he was adamant. He says that busloads would go down when he was playing for Liverpool, Hartlepool, whoever, would go down and jeer him and give him a hard time. And apparently he got it everywhere he played after that. And that was why he came up with the comment, "I have enjoyable years of sport," because he just didn't enjoy any of it. So he had a real hard time. So maybe the first couple of months he was getting a bit of sympathy because a lot of people realised that he was innocent and his career was affected and his life was affected. But then the worst bit for him came when he came home for training one day, and his 3 daughters were lined up in the driveway of his house, and the youngest one says, "Daddy, is it right that you killed a man?" And he just looked at them. The wee lassie was only a toddler, maybe 4, 5, 6 years old. And he says, "What do you mean?" She says, "Did you shoot him?" And he says, No. He says, "Oh, it's just that somebody in the park says to me that your daddy's a murderer." So he says when he realised that it was these kids were going to get all this stuff as well, he just couldn't believe it. He says, I like to think that I could handle this getting stick off the players in the park or the fans, but no the children, in the park. So
60 league games for your club, 54 goals.
Quite a record, isn't it? Quite an achievement, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Could have been a lot more, but
somebody so young, and then moved to Liverpool, which I don't think would ever happened if that incident hadn't happened. Sorry.
I think they were probably quite keen to get him. I think Struth was ruthless. I think Struth was keen to get him off the books. He realised that second season he wasn't great. He still played a lot of games, but he was probably playing more as an inside right or an outside right then. And Jimmy Smith was really coming through, and he was getting the centre forward jersey. And he was our top scorer up until Ali McCoy, I think, if memory serves me right. So Newcastle were in they were a big team at the time, and Liverpool had tried previously. And then at the end of the season, Rangers went on the European tour to Germany and Austria. They come home. Sam went to Girvan, as he always did on his holidays, and got a telegram from Struth's ordering him back to Ibrox. And he went back up to Ibrox the next day, and he told him he was moving to Liverpool. He says, "I don't want to move to Liverpool." He says, "You don't have any say in the matter. You're going." So he moved there for £8,000, which was a joint club record fee for Liverpool. They had never paid out any more for a player, so he went there. It was a record transfer fee wherever he went. He went for record transfer fees. That was his one thing. But Liverpool was that was when I realised that probably didn't leave Ireland when he was 16, because the day he walked into the Liverpool dressing room and he was introduced to the players, and they said, "My God, you don't talk Irish, you talk Scottish." And he says, "Aye." So he had a broad sort of Glaswegian accent. And that was when I thought, he must have moved here earlier than 16, because if you were 16, you would still talk. You would still the twang. You'd talk that way all your life, wouldn't you? Aye. So, Liverpool. That was I don't know if it was the right move or the wrong move, but in his first 25 games, he scored 18 goals, and only two other players in Liverpool's history have scored that amount of goals quicker. One of them was Daniel Sturridge and some other guy. But he started off really well at Liverpool, and he was scoring a lot of goals. And then he got injured, and then he was sort of out of the team for a wee while. He was sort of vying with a guy called Gordon Hodgson, who's an absolute Liverpool legend, a South African guy. he was also a professional cricket player. And Hodgson was a goal machine. He sort of regularly hit 25, 30 goals every year for Liverpool. But he moved Hodgson to accommodate Sam English. But then when English got injured, they moved Hodgson back to number 9. And then Sam was playing different positions, but still scored a lot of goals for Liverpool. But again, second season he was playing in the reserves. He was moved to the reserves, and they signed another centre forward, and they couldn't get back in the team. And it was a bit, again, the second season. The second season syndrome they'd suffered at Rangers.
It was a ruthless sport then for players, but ruthless.
Oh, aye.
You get cast aside very quickly.
What? Sorry.
You get cast aside very quickly.
Aye. No, there was no loyalties. I mean, the managers were that's the right word. The managers were absolutely ruthless. They definitely were. Somebody a better option, you're out, they're in. No room for sentimentality. So he was travelling about playing for the reserves. He played for the first team a lot of games. Played a lot of games for the Liverpool first team in the second season, but he didn't score as often. Still scored a few goals, but he didn't score as often. But by that time, I think he was giving up the ghost, to be honest with you. And the alternative was to go back and work in the shipyards, and nobody wanted to do that once they had sort of had a taste of professional football.
No, once you leave the yards, you don't go back, if you can help it, mate.
That's right, aye.
His career finished relatively young, but that wasn't uncommon back then, eh? Now we're talking about players.
Well, it was 28, I think.
Aye, it wasn't uncommon, eh?
People never he'd had a... No, like nowadays.
No,
very, very few. Very, very few people. He left Liverpool and went to Queen of South for a season. Again, a record transfer fee, but he asked to be dropped around about Christmas time because he was overweight and he wasn't performing well. He'd scored about 6 or 7 goals, and then he come back and played a couple of games, and then claimed in the press that he was being hounded out of Scotland again. Because of the John Thompson incident. A lot of people poo-pooed it and says he was fellow professionals. A referee said he was talking rubbish, and other people backed him. So I tend to think that he was being hounded out. And then every time he was going for a move, the potential list of clubs that were after him was getting further and further down the food chain. And there was only really one club wanted him, that was Hartlepool's, who played in the bottom tier of English football. So it was a bit of I think he went there for £250, which was still a record for Hartlepool's, but it was near an awful lot of money. And they were down there with the worst, So, but when he went there, they made a big thing of signing an international player. And he was certainly far too good for them. Still a bit overweight, maybe not as much passion for the game as he'd once had. But he was still a star turn. 10 years after he left, they were still talking about him in terms of being the best ever player that Hartlepool had seen. So, he certainly made an impact there.
Yeah. He scored 27 league goals, which is still not bad return, about 70 games,
He ended up the captain as well, but they effectively put him out of the game because they had signed a couple of kind of half decent players at that level in his second season. Again, he tailed off in his second season, which was a recurring theme. But they had signed a couple of players, and the chairman didn't think they'd got value for money because they ended up really fighting against relegation. And in those days, you had to reapply to get into the league. There was no pyramid, so re-election, I think it was called. So the chairman wasn't happy. The manager wanted him to stay, but the chairman says, no, they're going to go with youths. You're going to go with young kids from the area, guys that will be proud to play for Hartlepool's. And the manager said he still wanted to keep Sam, and he offered them sort of vastly reduced terms, which he knocked back and said, no, I can't play for that. So he was effectively put in the scrap heap at, 28 or something. And then Coleraine came in from, probably the nearest big team to his birthplace, and But no, Hartlepool's wanted a fee for him and they couldn't afford it, so he never played again. He turned out in Old Crocs matches for Yoker and charity matches back home, but no, he never kicked a ball again, which was really sad. A career that had started so promising.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the incident that happened back at Ibrox Park just affected his mindset? Is that your opinion?
Absolutely. Oh, aye, without a doubt, Ox. It just sort of, with every person that called him a murderer and a killer, it just ate away at him and added to his woes, and he just wasn't the same person. He hated going out. He stayed in all the time. Hated going out because people just stared at him. He said, so he just did not like that at all. And so I'm not saying he became reclusive because I don't know that, but he's certainly the players used to like get out for a meal and stuff after the football. But I think he sort of kept himself and just went home. So. A really sad ending to, I think he'd have been an absolute fantastic career. He could have been well up there with, the legends. Because who comes in and scores 40? His 44 goals weren't a flash in the pan, because he went down to Liverpool and did much the same thing. At least for the first half of the season, he was in fire. He was scoring every week. Scored in loads of 7 or 8 games in a row. Then scored, the Austrian team came and he scored a hat trick against them. They were Rapid Vienna. So he definitely had the tools for the job, but he just wasn't given a chance.
When you interviewed the family after it finished, were they happy to you were putting the book out to tell?
Definitely, aye. I think they felt that. I assured them that I was only ever one to, do Sam justice and tell the story the way it should have been told and the way it should have been passed down generations, rather than the add-ons that weren't complementary to Sam. And the family, fair play, they're very private, but realised that I had no ulterior motive, because I would never go against anybody's wishes or criticise any Rangers player for no reason or anybody for that reason. But I think I personally thought it was a story that was really worth telling, and a tragic story, but a story that was worth telling, because I don't think Sam English should be remembered just as the guy that was involved in the incident where John Thompson died. He should be remembered for his goals and his great play. I mean, he was a fantastic player. Again, I read every single match report that he ever played in, and he was just a fantastic player. He was very, very skillful. They had offside then, but he was a master of springing the offside trap, and defences were really wary of him because he was so fast, lightning fast, and his trick was to lobby keepers. If somebody came out, he had it down to a T, lobbing them over the head, and goal virtually every time. So he was just a fantastic player, but his career just didn't pan out the way it should have.
When we were chatting the other day there, mate, when we were arranging this, you told me when you were doing some recce for the book about his grandson, which I felt was unbelievable fate when you were...
Oh, aye. Aye, his great-grandson, Gregor Cree. He plays for Yoker, like right. Sam did, and I went along to speak to him.
Position?
One day when he was centre forward. Aye, he was playing centre forward, and I went along to see him one day, and it was against St Anthony's, and he scored a fantastic winning goal, and it was 90 years to the day that Sam had scored a winning goal for Yoker at the same end, at the same ground, at the same end, and it was just, I just thought, something there. So I wanted to finish the book by interviewing Gregor, and he came across just how proud he was of his great-grandfather. He was just, he had so much admiration for what Sam had achieved, and he was just delighted to be sort of following in his footsteps a wee bit, and playing for the same team and scoring goals. And it's just, it was just fascinating.
Would you say that the English family were a Rangers family?
not necessarily, no.
No.
They certainly are now.
Right.
But I don't know at that time. You know, their dad was. I mean, Sam's dad was American.
Right.
Sam's grandparents came from the same place in Ireland as he did, but they moved to America, and his dad was born in America. Although they came home a couple of years later, and his dad was kind of brought up in the same place. There was nothing to suggest that his dad was a farmer and he farmed flax and other things. But there was nothing. I think he was a hard-working man, but there was nothing to suggest they were into football. When he came over here, his dad got a job in John Brown's shipyards as well. And Sam obviously went to Dalmuir School. Then he left and became a grocery boy, and then got his apprenticeship in Beardmore's engineering firm in Dalmuir. And they lived in that area most of their life. But I'm not sure about their football allegiances. I'm sure they probably might have been Rangers fans, but I don't know. There's no suggestion that Sam was a Rangers man, although I'm sure he was, because he played for them. But he was playing every Saturday. He was a wanted man as a boy. He was all sorts of teams were wanting him. He was really successful with his school, and then after that way, the BB and other teams, youth teams, and then into the juniors, to Old Kilpatrick, and then Port Glasgow, and then Yoker. So he was virtually playing every Saturday. So he wouldn't have got too many matches if he was. But there's no suggestion anywhere that I could find that he ever went to Rangers matches.
Did you, when you wrote the book and you were doing the studying for it, speaking to the family, researching it, did you feel as if there was any bitterness towards your club that we could have handled it better for the lad?
Maybe bitterness isn't the right word. Maybe sadness. Sadness that it was. I know there is people. There is people that I spoke to quite a few people from Belfast that were involved in doing a mural in East Belfast. They did a mural on the side of a wall called the Ulster Connection, and they had all the players that played for Rangers, that had a good career with Rangers, that came from Northern Ireland, and they decided to make Sam the focal point. So he was virtually the size. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's some great pictures of it on the internet, and it was a cracking mural. And I spoke to a couple of the guys that were behind that, and they always felt that there was a certain embarrassment towards Sam English by Rangers because of what had happened, which they felt was really, really unfair, because Sam was blameless, and they felt that. And certainly the feeling I got researching at the time was that Bill Struth. Sam English says that Bill Struth didn't even say cheerio to him when he was leaving, which I thought was pathetic. And it's okay being an autocratic man if you can still have a bit of dignity and respect and treat people right. But he says he never ever says a lot. He says Struth never have spoke to him a lot, but he was the boss and that was it. Before a match, he would say, "Okay, just go out and play a usual game," and that was it. I can't imagine managers these days doing that. But I certainly felt that Struth handled it wrongly. I don't think he handled it wrongly in respect that he should have kept Sam English, because Sam English had definitely gone off the boil, which he admitted himself. He says, "I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to stay at Rangers. I felt like I could have got my foreign back." But he says, "I understand why he done it." He says, "But it was just the manner in which it was done. Wasn't he great?" Yeah, and definitely a lot of the boys I spoke to in Belfast were, that knew the history of Sam English.
Would that be no common then? As soon as you were surplus to the requirements, it was out. Is that just
it was because there was no substitutes in these days, Ox. So you think what you've got to do, if you've got two cracking centre forwards, you've got to accommodate them somewhere else. So you've got the way the teams lined up then was a sort of 2-3-5 formation. So you've got your two backs, your goalkeeper and your two backs. Generally, it was the same people that played every week. Even with a wee injury or whatever. But if when Sam English came into the team, he had guys like Jimmy Fleming, and Jimmy Smith was there at the time, and they had Jimmy Fleming and Jimmy Smith were both good centre forwards, but they were moved to different different positions to accommodate him. But then you had guys like Alan Morton, who was never ever going to be taken out of the team. So there was few positions up for grabs. So as soon as Sam English had that bad season, that bad second season, I thought the writing was on the wall for him, because he's got Jimmy Smith there, who's a proven goal scorer, who stepped right into his shoes and started scoring right away. And any time he did, Bill Struth, I suppose you couldn't do anything but keep faith with somebody like Sam English in the first season, because he scored so many goals. And Jimmy Smith found himself surplus to requirements, or maybe playing in the left wing, which must have been alien to him as a big gangly guy. But as soon as Sam English was maybe injured or something, Smith came in and usually scored. But then as soon as English was fit, Smith would be back out again. So it was ruthless. Struth was ruthless. And listen, it kind of had to be, because they had a really good Motherwell team at that time, who won the league, and they won the league in Sam English's first season. They were a fantastic team at the time, and Celtic obviously were decent. So to keep up with them, it had to be ruthless. But I still think Sam English was really hurt at the way it all ended for him, and the fact that he was just sort of showing the door and not even a cheerio. Mm-hmm. But ruthless times.
Jeff, great insight. I hope everybody goes out and buys the book. Another part of our Rangers history. How long did it take you to put together?
I started it 7 years ago. Started researching 7 years ago, but then obviously I was asked to do the Mark Walters book, so I did the book for Mark, and then I got on with it again, and then a publisher asked me to write a book on pick 50 our best wins over Celtic, which I wasn't massively keen about doing, because I don't really like these kind of books, not my thing. But I did it because it gave me a good chance to delve right back into the history again, and go and look at my first one, and found out all about guys like John Barker, who had scored their first hat trick against Celtic, and a local boy from Linthouse in Dublin. And so that was good. Enjoyed doing that one. It took me about 6 months. So then I was back right on to Sam English again, and there's just so much to research, and even trying to find out when the family had left Ireland to come to Scotland, and then you hit the stuff about they were going to go to Canada, and you have to find out what kind of farmers they were and what they did, and then they had 10 kids. They had an 11th when they came to Scotland.
There was no telly then, mate.
That's right. That's right. There must have been a COVID outbreak or something. Everybody's in the house for 15 years. But there's just so much to do, and it's just so time consuming. And I had to find out what he did in the shipyards and how much he was paid, and you've got to go to the university and view their records. And then I was through Edinburgh viewing records through there, and then I was doing it at Liverpool. How did you unravel the brown envelope, mate? Sorry,
how did you unravel the brown envelope? Which wasn't uncommon then. How did you unravel that?
No, it was when Sam English was talking about the teams that were after him. Mm-hmm. He said one of them, a guy called Jack Tinn, who was Portsmouth manager, I think, interviewed him in, I think it was Wipers Bar in Glasgow City Centre. He said the first time I'd ever been in a bar, and then he spoke to Herbert Chapman in his hotel, and he spoke to this one there, and blah blah blah. He says, and then there was Bill Struth. He said, I'd never ever spoken to Bill. He says, but the brown envelopes arrived weekly at John Brown's shipyards. He says, with a couple of pounds in it. He says, and with so many mouths to feed, because his career sort of lived through the Great Depression. It went through the Great Depression in Scotland. So there was a time when his dad and most of the family were out of work. And the queues outside the Labour Exchange were round the block. It was bad times. So if you were a footballer, you were lucky. You were in that. So he was playing for Yoker at the time, but he was getting a few quid to supplement that from elsewhere. And he said they were on a boat. He said they were on a £1 a win at Yoker, which was, he says, if you're playing 3 and 4 times a week, he said, so he was getting, even at Yoker, he was getting double what he was getting in the shipyards just for playing for Yoker. So then when he went to Rangers, obviously his wages went up. So it must have been really hard to go back to the shipyards after playing at teams like Rangers and Liverpool.
Mm-hmm. So you finished that project? What have you got sitting on that you're slowly working Rangers-wise? Anything? You having a break? Yeah.
Having a wee break just now, Ox. Been telling me a few things. I was watched a great programme on, I know it's been on a few times, but the Jim Baxter documentary on BBC Alba. Watched that last week or the week before.
The party's over.
I thought it was really good. But do you know who I thought was the real star of the show was Willie Henderson. I thought he was fantastic. The stories that guy had was unbelievable, and I thought, you know what, a book on Wee Willie would be really interesting. I find after doing so many books, it has to be something that really excites me, really interests me. So, and I thought Willie Henderson, I spoke to him a few times, and he's just a wealth of stories. He's got a great personality, bubbly personality, funny man, and by all accounts, in that era, I mean, he was one of our few actual world class players. Him and Baxter were the two world class players in the Rangers team at that time. So I just missed him. I'd never seen much of Willie Henderson. So a lot of stuff in Willie's life and career that might be worth writing about. So that might be next.
Right, have you spoke to him?
We'll wait and see.
Have you spoke to him?
I spoke to him through a third party.
Right, okay.
And I'm just waiting to hear back. So if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I'm not massively bothered, but we'll wait and see. I would like to. I was quite keen in doing something, maybe with somebody like Sasa Papac, because I'd quite a keen interest in the Balkans War, and what went on in Yugoslavia and Serbia and all these places, and I thought it might be nice to write a sort of history of that, and do not just a wee history, not a massive history, and do something on a player at the same time, how it was for him growing up during the conflict and stuff. I'd like to do maybe something like that. But my Bosnian's no great.
Right?
What do you mean you're from Bosman? Bosman. But the good thing about that, Ox, is that you doing books about Sam English and doing books about people from different eras. You get to know football was so different in these. Each era has different styles of football and different styles of players. You play different positions, and they just their tactics are all different. And it's just great learning about that stuff. And because I grew up not really knowing what a right half or a left half was, or an inside right. But you soon learn where they played and what their job was, and it's fascinating. So that's for me. It's great to be learning while you're doing these things. And
the legacy you're leaving for your family, Jeff, their books are they going to disappear, and your name's part of the Rangers history now, mate? Is it something you think about? No,
that's scary, isn't it? It's scary. It's fantastic. That's more than I could ever have dreamed of, And if they sell the books eventually in the Rangers shop, it would be fantastic, because it's just great to see things like that happening. I like to, if I go to a lot of games all over the place, and one of the things I like to do is go to a club shop, but I just hate when you see the run-of-the-mill stuff, the same stuff all the time. I like to see different things, and I like to see a club shop that sells back issues of programmes or, magazines or club books, and I always usually buy a book and have a read at it. And I think that's what makes club shops rather than, tops and tracksuits and T-shirts. It's got to be more to it than that, isn't there?
If I get you a new pencil when we win the league this year, will you promise me you'll write a book on 55?
Oh, yeah, I've started keeping the diary. I've started keeping the diary, and if I think for a minute I'm going to jinx it, I'll have a ceremonial burning at midnight. I hate to jinx it, but I've just got this feeling in my bones that I've had that feeling before, but
Yeah, well, we'll not go into that.
No. What's in the past is in the past.
Aye. What about, how do you see our club? Obviously, with some of the stuff you've studied in the last few years, how do you see where we are, what we've been through, and how do you see us through your eyes? Because you're a supporter first and foremost.
Aye. At the start of the season, I was really worried about. I thought Ryan Kent could be our talisman this year, and I was really worried about him after a few games. I thought he was playing quite aimlessly in the part, and I didn't think he was. I know he scored a great goal to win his game at Aberdeen, but there was a couple of games when I thought, don't know. He seems to be going for the jugular. It seems to be going across the park more than anything. But he's really kind of stepped up the last few weeks, last few games, and he's absolutely a great talent. The boy is, and there's others in the team that fill maybe hope. We're certainly in a much better place than we were. Even under Warburton. I remember we all thought Warburton was the saviour.
I know somebody who didn't.
Oh, really? Right, okay. Right. Well, we all thought he was going to be the saviour, and then I still have nightmares about Danny Wilson and Rob Kiernan in the centre of defence, and Wes Foderingham rolling the ball out to the both of them looking at each other, and I'm thinking we're in a much better place. We've got Highlander, and we've got Goldson in the centre of defence. You've got Edmondson and Balogun that can come in. You've got we've got options. Barisic is playing really well. Still would like to see us making and taking more chances like everybody else would. Because we don't put teams to the sword the way other teams do. And I think until we start doing that, can we win the league and get over the line by scraping through in some games? And no beating Livingston away. Listen, they're probably never going to go through. Well, nobody's went through the season and won every game since the great Rangers team of the early 1900s. So it's a hard thing to do, and there's always going to be hiccups along the way. But we got off to a great start winning at Pittodrie. So first Old Firm game will be interesting, Ox. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if the crowds will be allowed back in for that one.
That'll be a one-off trial event with 60,000 will be allowed in, mate.
That's right, aye. That's right.
Maybe
aye, we'll wait and see, yeah. But I'm sure Holmes will sort that out for him. But
how you?
No, I think I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. Hopeful.
And how do you rate Gerrard? Your own personal thoughts?
Still think he's good. I still think he's a man because he's got. I still think he's been through over the course so much, and is it so difficult to go from being a player to a manager? I think it's more difficult if you go from being a player to an iconic player to a manager at the same club like John Gregg. Or maybe John Gregg just wasn't a great manager, but in saying that, John Gregg came within inches of being really successful.
Eric
Johnson doesn't. Aye.
We won the treble plus maybe the European Cup.
Exactly, and when people say to me that John Gregg was an absolute failure and a flop as a manager, I don't think he was. I certainly don't think he was. But then you've got Gerrard leaving Liverpool, a big team like Liverpool, and coming to a big team like Rangers. He's got a fresh start. He doesn't know the players. I think John Gregg maybe had problems with some of the players, and he knew them all. And it's really hard to go in any walk of life to go from being one of the guys to being the boss. The next day, difficult in any industry. But Gerrard's came to a completely different team. He's shown right for day one that he was a boss. He's quite a hard-nosed guy. I think he'll be successful. And unfortunately, if he's not successful with us, I think he'll be successful somewhere else eventually. And I hate to think that people are coming here to do their apprenticeship, and using us to make their mistakes and learn. But I hope we see something tangible for having had him for, this is third season, isn't it? So, is he on a 3-year contract?
Just extended last year, didn't he?
Fair enough, aye. So I mean, I would love to see him staying for 5 or 6 years, because I don't think managers build teams overnight, and I know it's no overnight. We're into the third season, but if these mid-season collapses, we can't go to Dubai again, can we? Surely.
No, I would say Gillane, I think. I don't think that. I was sending them to Gillane, but I don't think there is a mid-season.
That's right. Oh, there's no this year. That's right. Aye, a weekend in Rossi, and then they can come back. But they've definitely got it, because before Christmas they were playing some great football. They were doing really well, and it was enjoyable to watch. It's just that it's hard to gauge it just now, isn't it? Because there's no fans in, and I think it makes such a big difference. It's like watching training games at times. It's all about atmosphere. And I think it's proven one thing, that football's not really anything without fans. All that's up for grabs on a Saturday when you watch Rangers just now is 3 points, and you do it out a sense of loyalty, and you watch the games and they're not great, and it's so different for being there. It's just maybe because I go to all the games like loads of other people, and there's such a difference watching it in the house. But if you watch a game in the house, if you can't make it for some reason and there's a full house there, it's different, isn't it? From watching a game with nobody there.
I like just saying football's not about fans. That's what it's showed them, innit? So it's maybe reality.
I think it's proved it without a doubt. Proved it without a doubt. And I think, like, once again, Rangers fans have stepped up and put money into the club. We've all bought tops and season tickets and everything. Everything. But I don't think we get treated greatly by the board. And I still think we're second-class citizens, and people might criticise me for saying that and saying I'm no staunch, but I don't really care.
Well, you're entitled to your view, mate. You're entitled to your view.
Always been of the opinion that there has to be a better relationship between a club and its fans. And I see a lot of clubs have got that, and you get a lot of clubs that take their fans for granted. And I still think we're one of them. And I know there's not been talk. One thing that I'm passionate about is a lasting memorial for the 66, and like hundreds of other people, I go every year to the service over at Ibrox, and we stand outside the Rangers shop where it happened, and then you walk round to the John Gregg statue. I believe John Gregg statue was supposed to be a memorial for the 66, but to be honest, it's a statue of John Gregg with a plaque on it. And I'm not being disrespectful, but we need something that's dedicated to the people that lost their lives, because you go down to the likes of Liverpool and theirs is outstanding, and I don't see why theirs should be any different to Liverpool's. We should be remembering, our own folk a lot better. I think. I don't know how you feel about that, Ox, but
I don't disagree, mate. I mean, I'm nothing against the John Gregg statue, but
oh no, I think it's fantastic. I think John Gregg absolutely 100% deserves to have a statue. It's great, and it's a great meeting point for people and all the rest of it. But there was talking of having a garden behind the Edmonds house where the old ticket office used to be, where the old Rangers Pools office used to be, and whether there was planning issues with Glasgow City Council, I don't know. But everything's went quite quiet. I haven't heard anything about what's happening, and we know that far away for the 50th anniversary. And it would be really sad if that came and went without something more tangible to look at and to pay with respect.
I accept your point about communication can always be better. Yeah, it can always be better. But I think the problem is with the media being so negative against us, and some of the scribes, mate. We seem to be fighting a battle all the time, but every time you open the drawer for a couple of years, they were finding new stuff they had to deal with, and it's prioritising. It's difficult. But I accept that our club, our history, and that should be something.
We don't help ourselves. We don't help ourselves. I mean, I opened the Sunday Post at the weekend there, and buried inside was a story about the former Rangers directors in the Public Prosecution Service, the Crown Prosecution Service, saying that they're digging into Rangers in 2013 or 14, 2013 I think it was malicious. They've admitted that it was malicious. Right? Now, all that stuff at the time was front page news, right? And as soon as there's a wee bit of comeback, now, we don't like the people that are really involved in it, Charles Green and Imran Shahid and all these people who didn't cover themselves in glory when they were at Rangers. But they're now suing the Crown Prosecution Service, because
big money.
Well, it's millions and millions, isn't it? It's they reckon up to about £100 million. So does that vindicate Rangers a wee bit? They were wronged a bit. Or I know we're just talking about some of the characters that were involved in that soap opera, but stories like that I think should be in the front page. But it's no a negative story against Rangers, and I don't want to fall into that trap because I worked in the media for years.
Maybe needs a book.
I'm not clever enough to write a book about that. I'd get sued for every page. I don't want to fall into the whole media thing. I worked in the media for years. I don't want to fall into the whole media trap that everybody hates Rangers, because I don't think that gets you anywhere. But I think you need to address certain things when they come along, head on. And I don't think our club's been good at that. and it's been the fans. I think the club should take the lead in a lot of these things. You know, there was. Do you remember going back to Souness's time? Do you remember he was banned and he appeared at the tunnel?
Yes, I do. STV.
He appeared at the tunnel, right? STV were covering the game. I worked for STV at that time. They were covering the game. One of the cameramen spotted him and did a shot of him. Now that went out in Scotsport over the weekend, and nobody made anything of it. Then it appeared in the Daily Record on the Monday morning, and Souness got a ban. He then summoned STV bigwig over to Ibrox and told him that they'd got him a ban, and he was banning him for 18 months. Right? Then within a couple of months, the advertisers were all getting onto Rangers saying, "Why have you banned STV? It means your adverts only appearing in Scotsport." Right? And Scotsport's got a much bigger following sports scene.
Right.
So then they got them back. They got Rangers summoned STV again, and they said, "Right, we're letting you back in, but you need to apologise." And STV said, "What we apologising for? Doing our job, highlighting stuff. You know, we're there to cover the game. You shouldn't have been doing there. You were, but we picked up on it. We pick up on a lot of things during matches. No, we're not apologising." They went, "Right, you're banned again." So then I get this story. I get this story yesterday for the guy that was involved in the negotiations to STV, and the advertisers complained again, and then they get let back in. You know, it's just there's been this uneasy relationship for decades, and we can't. I think sometimes when we think that everybody hates us, it takes a gloss off supporting your team in the good times, even though we've made an awful lot of them recently. But that's not to say you shouldn't challenge everything you think is a bad decision against your team, because you absolutely should. And if Rangers nipped these things in the bud when they happened, then they wouldn't all pile up into this massive list of grievances. You know, if they think that somebody was really bad, when say they say the News of the World or the Sun or whatever was really bad in a certain instance, then take them to task for it. You know, have somebody at the club that phones them up, gets them over. Don't go shouting, bawling about bans, but just have a word with them. See if they do it again. I ban them or do whatever, you know. But they also have to look at their own players, their own people, because there was 2 or 3 years ago there was a certain player who was brought up at Ibrox and come through the ranks, and he used to do everything he could to make sure he was in the photograph just for a bit of fun. You know, this was one of the snappers told me this, and they were filming trains. They were taking pictures at training. He would tell other players to hide their faces so they couldn't get their photograph taken. It was just stupid. So it has to work both ways. You know, if you're going to have I think you need to have a good relationship with the media until the media mess up, and then I think you've really got to take them to task, because Rangers have got a lot of power, and they don't always use it the right way. You know, I think we should be much bigger and better, and we should be doing things the right way and doing things firmly, standing up for the club, standing up for the supporters. Because we stand up for the club.
Do we appreciate how powerful the Blue Pound is? Do you think the punters would appreciate that?
I kind of go back to 2012 when the rest of the SPL, because I include Kilmarnock in that because they abstained, but the rest of the SPL voted to send us down. Couldn't wait to send us down, and there was all this talk of boycotts at the time. And I said to my wife, "I'll never step foot inside another SPL ground again. Anything that put us down," and I never have. I'm not saying I'm any big man or anything, but just a point of principle. I says I'm not going to go and give them my money. But so many fans says we're going to do it, and as soon as it, you know, they've just never stuck by it, you know. And I don't deny anybody the right to watch your team. You know, people have the right to watch your team, but you just need to decide what's more important. And what's more important for me might not be important to you. So it's up to people. But there was just a lot of noise about boycotts, but they never ever happened. It was just noise. That's all it was.
We've had that debate many a time on the show, and I've got a view on it, mate, and I'll add you in this, but look, we're a certain vintage now, so we can say that and we can stick by. But when we were 20 years of age, would anybody have kept us away from watching Rangers?
No comment. No, probably not. No, probably not. But then again, the guys at 40 and 50 would probably have in saying what we're saying now.
No,
But
exactly.
you don't have to have a season-long boycott. But you pick out who you think's the worst offender and say, right, we're not going to go to that game. That hits them big time. But it just never happened because just of what you said, Everdale. That's probably put self-interest before the long-term, gain of the team. And I know that people have got the argument as well that if the players need their backing, well, we've proved before that we can go and win in big arenas without any supporters. So I don't think that holds up. But you're probably right. I probably wouldn't have backed it then. Maybe I wouldn't say older and wiser, or maybe older and no, I probably wouldn't have. No, when I was 20,
I know you wouldn't.
I caught rumbled.
Right, where is your club going to be in 5 years' time, in your opinion, after you've wrote the 55 bestseller?
Going for 60. That would be some achievement. Do you know what I enjoyed? I really enjoyed. A lot of people say now it can't be much fun winning 9 titles in a row and not having any competition and blah blah blah. I thought it was brilliant. I thought, but don't worry, don't get me wrong. The circumstances were different. We had competition, but winning 9 in a row to me was just unbelievable. It was fantastic. It was just awesome. But then, just one of my greatest moments watching Rangers came in the Scottish Cup semi-final in 2016 against Celtic when we beat them in penalties, because it had been that long since we really beat them and matched them, and I was nearly greeting at the end of that game. So if that's what we can do,
no comment.
Fair enough. But if that's what we can do, then with Mark Warburton's team, if Steven Gerrard gets his team to click and be consistent for a full season and adds players, there's no reason to suggest we couldn't be going in a run of 3 and 4 and 5 in a row. Because that's what happens. Football goes in cycles, doesn't it? And when you've got it's all about momentum. It's really difficult to get the momentum back once you've lost it. And that's what we're finding just now. God knows, nobody knows why what happened last season happened. I mean, it's a season of 2 halves if I've ever seen it in my life.
Uh-huh.
But to go from being so good to being so bad to being so passive. I remember the first couple of games after the split at home. One of them might have been a draw at home, a 0-0 draw against Motherwell or Kilmarnock or St Johnstone, one of these teams. And I'd never seen such a more passive display in all my life. We were terrible. There was no promptings. There was no running in behind defenders. There was no killer balls. We just passed the ball about for 90 minutes as if it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. And I never want to see that again. Never. We shouldn't have to put up with that, because these guys must have known that they were standing in the brink of history, and yet for some reason we just completely lost the plot and caved in.
Mm-hmm. I'd be interested to see when they're all finished and they're writing their books and their memoirs or whatever.
Aye.
And that why or when it all breaks, because eventually it will come out. Were they overtrained? Were they? What was the reason?
Alfredo Morelos, it was his fault. It's all his fault. Everything's his fault.
Everything's his fault. COVID.
Everything. Aye, COVID, global warming, whales washing up on beaches. All his fault.
Do you think Dave King could be right? The opposition, like, is when we do break it, it's a house of cards, mate.
Aye, I do. I actually do. And that's why I'm saying that I think we can, if we can continue what we're doing just now and just keep getting positive results, and we build that momentum, there's no reason why in the next few years we can't dominate the game up here. Because it's really just it's 2 teams, isn't it? Really, I know you're going to always have your wee individual struggles, like on plastic pitches and at Pittodrie and places like that, even maybe Tannadice later in the season. But it all boils down to 2 teams, and we just need to get the better of them. Easier said than done. I
think we've had the better of them in maybe the last 18 months, mate. Football.
I mean over head to heads, but we're one when Ryan Jack scored the goal, Ibrox was significant, and then we're one at Celtic Park significant, and these things were, getting over more hurdles, but it's doing it consistently and gaining that momentum, and winning the games that you might know have won last season, which is another old cliche, and it's just putting all that together, and we know what we need to do, don't we? I mean, all the fans, everybody knows which team we should be playing every week and who should be playing in what position, but I don't know how it doesn't happen, because we seem to have the best players. I think we've got the best players in the league. When they're on song, I think they play some great stuff. I mean, look at the Europa League. Some of the Europa League performances were fantastic. Really got us off our seats. And then you would come back to a mundane performance in the SPL. And whether that's SPL teams just being big and ugly and trying to stop us rather than other teams trying to play us, there might be something in that.
Right, one more question, mate. Yeah?
Okay.
You wrote the following books, right? 1986, The Rangers Revolution, Rangers v Celtic. Yeah? The Gers 50 finest Old Firm victories. Blue Thunder, Jock Wallace, A Season to be Cheerful, 92-93 season. A Great Boot and Tots, Alec Totten. Greek Rangers connection there. The Greatest Ranger Ever, Davy Meiklejohn. Blue Thunder, the Jock Wallace story. Moody Blue, the story of the mysterious Marco Negri. Winging It, it's the Mark Walters story. The Tortured Now, Sam English.
And The Journey.
What I want to ask you about is the 10 years of River City behind the scenes.
Shell suit Bob. I know. You're quite right to ask me about that. Why did it happen?
Yeah.
I spent six years down there working, and it was fantastic. Down in Dumbarton. It's great wee place. The Shield Inn's great wee place. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working in that. We turned Shell suit Bob into a Celtic fan just for a laugh. When he went in a coma when he fell down the stairs. We Deke pushed him down the stairs because he'd been snogging Deke's mum, wearing Macintosh shooter of Deacon Blue, and he was in a coma. And the director said, "Wouldn't it be fun if we put some football scarves in that?" And Stephen Purden, being a massive Rangers fan, he says, "Don't even think about it, big man. Don't even think about it." And we says to the director says, "What teams?" He was English. "What teams are you supporting?" He said, "I probably support Celtic." And he's like, "Shut up, don't even think about it." So it was merely a wind up than anything else, but it was definitely the wrong thing to do, and something I've regretted since.
The book of that story.
The book was great. The book was a high point in my life. Doing signings with some of the stars for that show was fantastic. I enjoyed working down there. That was a good laugh. I had 6 great years down there. But no, it's not in the same. It's in the shelf below the Rangers books at home. It's not the same one.
Right.
And what about Rangers in Russia?
Yes,
1962 tour of Russia.
That was below that, yeah, below where my list is. Sorry about
that.
I never mentioned Frank McDougall neither, mate. You know what I mean?
Okay, keep going.
But I just felt that River City, mate, would be the highlight.
Aye, it's definitely up there. It's definitely in the top 20 books I've written. Aye, top 20 or 30.
Well, you're not going to believe this, mate. That's 2 hours disappeared.
No, it's not.
Aye, it is.
I still get 30% on my phone.
That is 2 hours disappeared, mate.
No. Okay. Have you been talking for 2 hours?
I've not said a word.
I know you let me get myself into trouble.
Listen.
Told you.
Brilliant, mate. You're welcome on this show anytime to talk about Rangers, never mind your books.
Thank you very much.
Insight,
can we talk about how people can buy it?
Aye, go on then. You tell me. I was going to come to that, mate. That was my last thing.
Sorry.
See. Where can they get it, mate? Tell us.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. People can.
You haven't rehearsed that.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've messed up 2 hours of greatness. People could go to Twitter at JeffH1960. Is that my? I don't know if that's my Twitter name, but I think it might be at JeffH1960. They can get in touch with me there, or they can email me at jeff.holmes4@btinternet.com, and I'll make sure they get a copy. And not just a book, a limited edition, double-sided Sam English bookmark with purchases from me and free postage. I put that in as well. I'm going toe-to-toe with Amazon.
Oh yeah, you can take them on, mate.
I'm taking them on, honestly. So, that's my sales pitch. How did it go? How was it?
Brilliant,
okay?
Mate. Very professional. One of the best I've heard this week.
Is it no Monday?
Listen, mate, an absolute pleasure speaking to you as usual, mate. I don't know where that 2 years have gone, and I'm sure I'll get some bodies together and we'll have a pint at some point.
Definitely. Good man, Ox. It was an absolute pleasure.
We're going to play it with your favourite Rangers song. Take it away, my mate Fox.
I sailed the wild Atlantic, crossed the broad Pacific shore. I sailed around the stormy capes and I've heard the 40s roar. I've climbed the Indian Ocean, I've sailed the China Sea. But there's a sea back home in Scotland, more than all the rest of me. It's the blue sea of my rock. It's the greenest sight that I have ever seen. It's the blue sea of my rock. And it's not on the really just clear green. No more I'll sail the 7 seas, no more I'll ever roam. No more I'll feel the urge again, I'm back where I belong. And 3 o'clock each Saturday, I'll join the mighty song. With flags and banners all around.